Most Americans will never hit the $1 million mark before they retire, and many still end up living comfortably. See, the secret isn't in hitting a magic number, it's actually in the strategy. In fact, at age 65, only about half of Americans have more than $200,000 saved, and yet plenty of retirees are able to enjoy the lifestyle they want without working another day. So the big question is, how are they doing this? Well, one thing is that they've learned how to make their money work alongside Social Security, pensions, and other income sources, so their savings don't have to carry the entire load, which is really important. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, how to retire comfortably with $500,000 in savings. And I will walk you through the proven framework for making $500,000 last 30 years or more and show you how Social Security dramatically reduces your savings needs. And I'm going to explain the strategies that turn this number into a reliable, sustainable retirement income. So let's get started. I've reviewed hundreds of retirement plans for high net worth individuals, and one thing is clear. Retirement success isn't about the size of your account balance, it's about how you use it. And let me tell you, I've seen people with over $1 million, in fact, many times over, and they still run into trouble because they didn't have the right income strategy. And at the same time, I've seen others with far less enjoy decades of financial security because their plan was built to last. And what I've learned is that the key is coordinating all the moving parts. So Social Security, withdrawals, taxes, and other income sources so that they work together instead of against each other. And when the pieces fit, even a modest nest egg can go so much further than most people expect. And what I'm going to share today is the same framework that I use when clients ask, is what I have enough to retire comfortably? And when people think about retiring on $500,000, they usually focus on the number itself. And I think that's really where they get stuck. They've heard that they need at least $1 million or probably more. But the real question isn't, do I have enough? It's, how can I make what I have last? And so in this video, we're going to break down that question into a clear path forward. First, we'll look at why $500,000 can be a realistic retirement target for many Americans, despite what you may have heard. Then we're going to dig into how Social Security forms the income foundation that reduces the pressure on your savings. We'll cover withdrawal strategies that can make $500,000 last 30 years or more, how to coordinate all your income sources for maximum effect, and the lifestyle adjustments that stretch your dollars further. Finally, we're going to talk about backup plans, because I think even the best strategies need flexibility when life doesn't go according to plan. And by the end, you're going to have a framework that you can use to see exactly how $500,000 could support a comfortable, sustainable retirement. Now, the biggest obstacle for most people thinking about retiring on $500,000 isn't necessarily the math, it's the mindset. It's like I said earlier, we've been told for years that you need $1 million or probably more to hit that magic retirement number, and anything less is just going to feel risky to you, even if the numbers do actually work. But guys, the reality is that at age 65, only about half of Americans have more than $200,000 saved for retirement, as we already discussed. And that means that if you have $500,000, you're actually ahead of the majority of people. But instead of seeing that as a position of strength, a lot of people are just going to assume that it's a sign that they're behind. And I think part of the problem is that many people imagine they'll need to replace every single dollar they earned during their working years. But in a lot of instances, retirement might cost less than you think. So, one thing to understand is that you're no longer going to pay payroll taxes. And that actually adds up to quite a lot of money because it's coming right off the top, and that's 7.65%. So you're no longer paying that. The second aspect is that you're no longer contributing to retirement accounts. And Presumably, if you were able to save $500,000 or more, you were probably putting a hefty amount into your retirement accounts. Well, that's no longer going to be the case. Third, a lot of work-related expenses, like commuting and professional clothing, you're not going to have to do like dry cleaning or necessarily buy the same types of clothes you bought before. You're certainly going to save on wear and tear on your car probably. So those are going to drop off too. And so, those things alone, you'll be able to cut thousands from your annual budget, and it's not going to feel like a sacrifice. Now, when you factor in Social Security, often maybe covering 40 to 50% of your basic living expenses, then the gap that your savings needs to fill is far smaller than most people realize. And the core problem isn't necessarily that $500,000 is too little. It's really that people misunderstand how retirement income works, and they underestimate the role of guaranteed income sources. So even with $500,000 saved, many people make decisions based on outdated or oversimplified rules of thumb that I think could shorten the life of their retirement portfolio. So one example I like to use is building a plan around the idea of living off of interest without touching principal. The reality is, in today's market, that's simply unrealistic for most people, unless they have a lot, like millions and millions of dollars in the bank. And, it's especially unrealistic if you want your savings to meaningfully supplement Social Security and maintain your lifestyle. Because a sustainable retirement almost always involves drawing from principal, but in a smart and controlled way. Now, another belief is that you can just withdraw a fixed dollar amount every year without regard for market performance or inflation or tax impact. And let me tell you, that kind of rigidity can lead to overspending in bad markets and then underspending when you could safely enjoy more. So it's simply not going to work well for most people. Now, something else I see a lot is that some people also treat Social Security as just an extra instead of the income foundation that it really is, because in reality, it's often the largest guaranteed inflation-protected income source that you've got, and claiming it strategically can add tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. And that's a decision that you shouldn't take lightly, and you should spend a lot of time analyzing. Another flawed assumption, and this goes back to cost, is that while certain costs do disappear in retirement, and we talked about it, payroll taxes, commuting, work-related stuff, others can increase, like healthcare and travel, and the belief that expenses always go down can lead people to underestimate what they actually need each year. And when these flawed assumptions guide planning, retirees are going to run into avoidable problems, and relying solely on interest leaves you vulnerable to income shortfalls. Fixed withdrawals can lock in losses during downturns, and treating Social Security as an afterthought can mean claiming way too early and missing out on higher lifetime benefits. I really do see people come in a lot and just think, well, I'm going to start taking Social Security at 62. I'm tired of working. And that's literally all the thought they put into it. But that can be a big mistake. And finally, underestimating your expenses can create a budget gap that's going to force you to cut back later, and you're not going to have any choice about that at all, and it's going to be a permanent reduction in what you can spend. So what's the result of all this? Well, what could have been a comfortable, well-funded retirement turns into one that's filled with difficult trade-offs and less flexibility than what you planned for. And so if you're starting to wonder how your own retirement plan would hold up, whether you've got $500,000 or more, I've put together a short questionnaire that will give you clarity. Once you fill it out, I'll personally review your answers, and I'll send you a custom video showing you how to make your retirement income as reliable and tax efficient as possible. All you got to do is click the first link in the description below to get started. Now, back to the video. The moment that it clicks for most people is when they see their retirement plan laid out year by year, not just in terms of how much they've saved, but where their income will actually come from. And that's when they realize that the savings number is only one piece of the puzzle. Social Security might be covering half of their annual expenses. Strategic withdrawals from retirement accounts are going to fill most of the rest. And by layering in tax planning, like pulling from Roth accounts in certain years or managing withdrawals to avoid Medicare premium hikes, they can keep more of what they take out. And for many, this is the first time they've seen how a $500,000 portfolio, when paired with guaranteed income and smart planning, can actually provide a steady and sustainable lifestyle for decades. So, it's not about chasing a bigger number, it's about building a smarter plan. So how do you turn $500,000 into a retirement income plan that lasts? Well, it starts with knowing exactly what you need your money to do. And that means getting clear on your annual spending. So both your essentials like housing, utilities, and healthcare, and your discretionary spending for travel and hobbies and your lifestyle upgrades. From there, you map out your guaranteed income sources, Social Security, pensions, rental income, and then you calculate the shortfall your savings needs to cover. And when it comes to withdrawals, I don't believe in following a rigid 4% rule that ignores your unique situation. Instead, I use a probability-based guardrails approach. It's something that will adjust your withdrawals up or down based on how your portfolio is actually performing and how your needs may change over time. But look, I realize that most people at home aren't going to be able to use probability-based guardrail systems. So, look, guys, I think it's fine here to use a rule of thumb. And I just think 4% is probably too low for most situations. And so if you go to something like research from Guyton and Klinger, kind of the original research on guardrail systems, they show that for most flexible spending strategies, you could start with a withdrawal rate of around 5.5% per year while still maintaining a high probability of success in the long term. And I want to emphasize that it's not about guessing. I also think it's about regularly monitoring your plan, making adjustments when markets are strong or weak, and coordinating your withdrawals across different account types to manage taxes. That might be taxable accounts first to keep your tax bracket lower, or maybe do Roth conversions before required minimum distributions kick in. Maybe it's reducing discretionary withdrawals temporarily during a downturn to protect your principal. But I think the key is layer on lifestyle strategies like downsizing and relocating to a lower cost area. A lot of people, they'll submit the questionnaires and they'll have kind of high spending. And, the thing that would really help it is just either downsizing or relocating. I think if you're open, there's plenty of places abroad that have a lot of expats and a strong retirement community that you could live for a fraction of what you could live in America. And I still think, they've got good health care and they provide a community with activities so that you could have a meaningful retirement. But if you are, stuck on staying in the same area, which is understandable if your family's there and everything, downsizing could really go a long way. And, doing these types of things, you could stretch every retirement dollar further without feeling like the need to cut back. Finally, I'd say build in flexibility with backup options. So that might be part-time work. In maybe a worst case, you might be able to tap home equity if needed, or temporarily reduce discretionary spending during market volatility, especially if your portfolio took a really, really big hit. And that way, you're never locked into a single rigid plan. When you combine these elements, you're no longer relying just on $500,000 alone. You're using every tool available to create a reliable, adaptable income plan that can support you for decades. And, you could use something simple like the Guyton-Klinger framework, and that can be a great starting point with a 5.5% withdrawal rate as long as it's flexible. But remember, that's just a starting point, right? The key is customizing your plan to fit your unique income sources, tax situation, and your lifestyle goals. And that's exactly what I'll help you do. If you fill out the short questionnaire in the description, I'll personally review your information, send you a custom video showing how to turn your retirement savings into a sustainable income plan that works for you both now and in the years ahead. Ultimately, most people are never going to reach the $1 million mark before they retire, and they don't need to. With the right strategy, $500,000 can support a comfortable, sustainable retirement for decades. So if you're interested in that, hit the link in the description and you can fill out that short questionnaire. But look, guys, at the end of the day, the keys here are understanding your real spending needs, building on your guaranteed income sources, using a flexible withdrawal approach, and having backup plans for the unexpected, because it's always something, guaranteed, right? But when you focus on the plan instead of just the number, you're going to give yourself the best chance to enjoy retirement without constantly worrying about running out of money. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.